Yeah, I remember doing it before.
Yeah, I do too.
Well,
I was trying to figure it out. I don't think we ever did. Except that we minimize the window on your laptop and then it'll, not minimize, but resize.
anybody else know?
Call my grandson.
Yeah, you want to start?
Yeah. Can make two.
Yep, I'll get this figured out.
Well, thank you very much for your time today, and Happy New Year.
Same to you.
Happy New Year.
As a little bit of background, if I could, just to make sure everybody is on the same page. I know a lot of you have been through some of these steps, but previously the Delmarva Zoological Society managed a capital campaign that focused on three primary elements. One was the animal health clinic, which the zoo is now occupying and using to its great benefit. Another was the Discover Australia project, which has been partially implemented with our wallaby exhibit. And then a replacement for the William E. Morgan Visitor Center, which is our oldest building on campus, built in the early 70s, in great need of attention, and that project is pending. Before committing to the final project investments and sort of acknowledging the old adage that you've got to plan the whole before you plan a part, we wanted to pause briefly, take a step back, and strategically assess how we can best apply these investments to the community and to the outcomes that support the zoo. Going back to 2014, the Salisbury Zoo Commission held a strategic planning session, and Ron Alessi from the commission is here today. That session was facilitated by Salisbury University and the Beacon Group out of the Purdue School of Business, and was attended by a broad spectrum of community leadership. And it focused on the zoo's role within the community and its mission, vision, and values. Concurrently, the zoo staff was working on assessing operating needs and evaluating the current circumstances of the zoo as well as future opportunities. And Ian Shelley, who is our zoo registrar, was a participant in that work group and is here tonight also. Along with that, the Delmarva Zoological Society was awarded a grant through the Maryland Historic Areas Authority to conduct master site planning to specifically support the ultimate configuration of these improvements, their placement, and how they fit into the larger scheme and long-term planning for the zoo. And Ashley Boucher, who heads the Delmarva Zoological Society, is here with us tonight as well. So with the help of Becker Morgan, we've been working to try to synthesize all those diverse elements into guidelines that will help inform and promote the development of decisions that support not just physical facilities at the zoo, but the long-term operation of the zoo and how we fit into this community. As a key part of that process, we've been meeting with various community stakeholders to try to keep them informed and to seek feedback. And as part of that, I'd just like to draw attention to a couple things that are early in the master plan document that you've received. Because the concepts and the principles are as important as the physical facilities that we're looking at today. The mission of the zoo that's been accepted for a long time states in part that the zoo encourages appreciation of wildlife and inspires conservation of our natural world. A new outcome of the strategic planning session that we did was a better specification of the values of the zoo. And a couple of those that I'd like to draw your attention to is one is community asset. We're a recreational, educational, and economic development asset to our community. And accessible experience. We are accessible to all members of our community. Briefly, big idea is just a summary that we use to try to make sure that we can quickly summarize the idea that we're trying to present. And for us, we're saying we're a zoo, and our guests expect to see animals and to have fun. Our brand image is that the zoo is safe, clean, and family-friendly. It reflects excellence in the manner in which it cares for its living collection and in the service that it provides to its guests. And among our key principles, we state that we must provide a clean and safe environment conducive to family and other core social interactions, and that experiences are the primary product of the zoo. And those experiences have to be authentic, spontaneous, shared with family and friends, and promote experiential learning opportunities. And so when we say our product is really experiences, that's what we're trying to say. We're not coming to you and just saying, here's a list of animals that we want to exhibit, or here's a list of new enclosures or exhibits that we want to build. We're trying to present a program of experiences that are relevant to the community. And as we go through this, that should be the background, and we're hoping that you will look at that and give us feedback and let us know, are those the principles, are those the things that we should be trying to do? And so we appreciate your time, and I'll turn this over to Bill to run through the physical facilities part of this.
We started working with Ralph probably about 6 months ago on a new master plan, and we started with a previous plan. I think it was done by WDM, and what we essentially tried to do is, based on meeting with the stakeholders, is kind of first understand some of the dynamics of the existing zoo. And I think some of the things that came out of those early stakeholder meetings were some issues of connectivity, as well as some upgrades to some particular areas of the zoo, particularly W. Morgan Center, Australian Aviary Trail, as well as new opportunities to bring some growth to the zoo also. So based on that, this is kind of where we started from. These are an existing conditions map that shows the exhibits and trails to date, as well as showing on the graphic over there to the upper right, kind of the overall parameters of the zoo within the context of the site and some of the existing uses and adjacent uses. What we kind of came up with in working with Ralph was that there are several zones of the zoo. Big picture, there's the connector that runs east and west and connects the rest of the park system. We thought that was a strong element, and we wanted everything to kind of work off that corridor. The colors you see there on this plan just represent the various zones of the zoo. The pink is Tropics Trail, the orange is Discover Australia, yellow is the Andes, and the red is Delmarva Trail, and the blue is the Andes Trail with Holly Circle there on the left also. So the first step was just going through this and kind of seeing how we could clarify some of these trails and also add some new features.
One of the things we wanted to make sure that we could do was segregate an area for special events, evening activities, from the rest of the zoo where those activities might not be compatible with the animals. So that corridor that flows through is really intended to be able to support 5K runs through the park, as well as Zoobilation or other evening activities, but also be a mechanism for wayfinding where people can move from that main corridor out into the zones and the exhibits of the zoo.
The slide up on the screen now just shows a little bit more zoomed out view and just some of the opportunities as well as the adjacent uses. I think when we get a little bit further through the presentation, we'll talk a little bit about some challenges as well as some partnering opportunities. So this really kind of helps with that discussion. Zooming down a little bit into the master plan, we had developed 3 major focus areas that we looked at and working with Ralph, and those are identified in this graphic. First area on the far right exhibit with a new planned aviary. And then kind of picking up on what Ralph said, the third bubble represents an outdoor pavilion that could be used for a variety of uses.
And that pavilion is not a funded project. The other two, there is funding that exists specifically for them through the Delmarva Zoological Society. But we wanted to illustrate the pavilion because we want to be looking at opportunities for revenue development and other ways that we can bring in support to the zoo. So we thought it was important to illustrate that point.
Here's the kind of the first area, enlargement area. This is the Tropics Trail, and the idea here was that the right here is essentially the footprint of the existing W. Morgan Center. In our master planning studies, we have shown that building to be rebuilt essentially on the same footprint, with kind of a new concept where the exhibits would be viewed from the exterior undercover as opposed to going inside, and that gives a little bit more flexibility. I think in both the size of the exhibits and also the way they could be viewed and by the number of people that can view them also. So larger school groups can really view these from underneath the exterior canopy as opposed to having to go in a kind of small building and go in a number of groups. We're kind of seeing this building as a two-sided building where the front part that faces the main corridor could have some docent and other more public functions, and then the main entrance to the exhibit space would be off the back of the rear of the Tropics Trail here, and possibly some outdoor learning potential out here for small groups also.
One of our ongoing challenges is our logo is a snake. Snakes or reptiles are very popular, and yet this time of year we can't reliably present reptiles to the public, and so it's an experience gap that we think it needs to be addressed.
So the graphic here to the left, this just shows kind of a basic overview of the trail, some of the major points of the trail. The herb garden stays where it is. Number 2 is the existing alligator exhibit. The conure exhibit is essentially the same place. We changed the holding area for the animals to better work with the new building. Number 4 is the new W. Morgan Center. Number 7 over here is the flamingo and macaw exhibits. And right here, number 5 is kind of the public area we're seeing for special events or docents or other breeders out there. Graphic below here is just a view of that from the main east-west corridor there. Inside the building, as we were kind of discussing earlier, these areas in yellow are the reptile exhibits. So this area here is undercover, so you would come in through the rear of the trail and you could view these under cover of this roof. The purple areas are animal holding and areas related to the function of taking care of the animals, and then the gray spaces are storage for both docent and animal care. So here we just have some enlarged renderings of the same building, and these are very kind of schematic in nature, but hopefully it gives a little bit of the flavor of kind of what we were looking at. I think we want to pick up on some of the existing aesthetic and architecture of the Tropics Trail as much as possible in this new building. The areas here with the number 1s are the exterior viewing windows into the reptile exhibits. And we also kind of conceived in the gable and the pitch of the roof of having some additional storage space up here. I know overall, I think for the whole campus route, probably storage is a big need.
A huge challenge.
Yeah, a huge challenge. So moving along into the second area we looked at was the Discover Australia Trail. Just to kind of orient everybody, this is the the main connector through the zoo here. This is the exit to the Tropics Trail. The new W. Morgan Center kind of sits right here. So existing right now, the wall of the yard is pretty much in this location, but there's some challenges with the way I think that species is most comfortable being viewed, where creating a little bit more buffer from the path going up to the educational center is appropriate. I think what we're hoping to do here is add some kind of visual interest here at the entry of the trail, maybe similar to this, some Aboriginal post or something that really gives a good gateway to the trail. We like the idea of kind of keeping a water element that connected through here. So the wall of the yard gets kind of reconfigured here. And then the plan is to add 2 new exhibits, Kookaburra and Black Swan, kind of at the entry here. And then for a new aviary to sit between the existing bathroom and food service building and the gift shop. And I guess we're really seeing an opportunity with some enhanced plazas to make this a very nice public space here, where you can view into the aviary. You're having your lunch or coming out to the shop. This slide, we just showing some kind of rough renderings of the same path in 3D. Right over here is the aviary, and I think in talking with Ralph and some of the stakeholders, the idea of kind of a free-form structure that was naturalistic was something that everyone really liked. Right here is the gift shop building, and the path lines down here to towards the reptile and tropical trail. This is just a little overview slide showing essentially the same things we did on the master plan earlier, aviary, wallaby, 3 and 4, and the Black Swan, Kookaburra, and then the gift shop here is number 6.
Yeah, I feel the same way.
Who brought you there? Who brought you there?
Just a couple more views here of the Black Swan and Kookaburra. These are smaller exhibits. We may have an opportunity with some of these connecting water elements to create a bridge or a walkway that kind of gives you some opportunity for a 2-sided viewing of the aviaries as well as the wallabies of it. So the third part of our third area we looked at in detail was an area for an open air pavilion. Off to the left here, just a couple of examples of what it could or might look like. I think in finding the location, it was we did a lot of kind of back and forth on this, whether it was appropriate to have it at the entry to the zoo, but really with the two entries on either side, that made it a little bit challenging. And then the more we discussed it, we thought about the river and that really being an opportunity for a nice backdrop and some views, and it just so happens that there's kind of some empty space here as well as some repetitive paths, and this is the gift shop right over here. So it seems like this is a nice opportunity and a nice spot for a pavilion like that. And again, for some of the bigger public events, I think that could be used for that also.
I like that the precedent 3 that you have. That one seems to be the most, as far as multi-purpose, where you could do more with something like that as opposed to the first 2.
It has some storage, and those are things that we need to
You
consider.
needed to set up a sound system or something. It's got
Right.
some cover and
Yep.
all of that. I like that.
We want this to be able to serve school groups, story time groups, and perhaps be then usable for receptions or or other activities that might generate revenue for us.
Quite a question, I didn't want to interrupt, but now we've got a little bit of a break. You're talking about the stakeholders when you were doing the plan.
Mhm.
Was the accreditation agency a part of that group?
No, we've not reviewed this specifically with them. We can, but I don't think there's anything in this that really is a significant issue for them. We're maintaining our standards and their standards with what we're presenting.
I was just thinking more in terms of when you do it, when you're looking forward, they're obviously looking forward too.
Right.
And things have changed. If you look at zoos today versus zoos when I was a kid,
Right,
totally different.
right.
And they grew and changed over the periods of time. Just as a recommendation, before, is there anything that they see that they could have helped us maybe
Right.
change something?
Well, we're fortunate that the national headquarters is just down the road near Washington, so as we get into the more specific details, we can certainly review that with them.
Ralph, sorry if I can help you on that. In planning the facilities for the animals that
I'm
have
gonna
been
come up
added.
so we have a microphone.
Sorry, just trying to bail you out on this one. While our accrediting body hasn't been consulted directly for some of these enclosures that we are adding for the facility, we have been consulting their recommended experts at other facilities. For example, when we were planning the Kookaburra exhibit, we went to our accrediting organization's recognized Kookaburra expert at the Woodland Park Zoo in Seattle, and they are providing the specifications. How big should the enclosure be? What features should it be recommended? So while AZA isn't being consulted directly, their experts are being brought into this to help us with our planning.
Okay.
Is there anything, and let me hop on that. I see you're going to ask them for their expertise in what you want. My question to you is there anything that the AZA is going to want, like that big building that we just built? Is there anything down the road that they're going to expect you to have there that isn't in this plan?
I don't think so in terms of physical facilities. At the accreditation debriefing that we went through, and at the accreditation meeting in Florida when we were awarded accreditation, the one topic that came up was attention from the veterinarian. And I think they're looking over the next few years for us to expand the amount of time that we have a veterinarian on site and working with our collection. And we're working with Dr. Nolte now to try to start building in that direction. So that's probably the biggest challenge over the next 5 years, is how we manage and budget for veterinary care.
Now, is that something that you would expect us to be doing for you? Is that something that the Zoological Society and the Friends of the Zoo would be doing for you?
Well, currently the vet portion of the budget is through the city.
Okay.
Okay, I think I agree with Mr. Ireton. That was what I was trying to, he said it better than I. But are there things that they may see coming up that we don't have in the plan that maybe we should consider? Not the fact that we haven't addressed what we want to do.
Right.
I think that's a valid question. I would ask that question again, just
Okay.
when you get closer, closer to the time.
But, we also want to make sure that we're true to the community and that we're maintaining the values and the outcomes that this community wants out of this zoo. Because this zoo is unique. It's one of just a handful that are free to the public and free parking. Not many communities have a resource that's accessible to the community like this. And that's something that came through in the discussions that we've had. People value that, and they want us to continue to be able to offer that freely to the community.
Yeah.
Ralph, how much does that go into your planning for, obviously, and I guess if you were to ask you which question I would have, which sheet I would have a question about, it's going to be this one. How much does this expand the social things that we do at the zoo to raise money for the zoo? So what Jake and I figured out, this says covered, 636 square foot covered is what that word is there on that page under pavilions. You have this, you have a couple new little plazas, a couple of things. What is the society or the Friends, what is the hope to use this space for? Is this for expanded fundraising?
That would be a portion of it. But we also do things like presentations to school groups, story time, that, that are not part of that particular element that we need to provide better facilities for. I think there's two things. We need an on-site facility that's suitable for special event programming, whether it's wedding receptions or other activities. And we need an infrastructure that supports that, and that's where that pass-through corridor is important. That we continue over the next few years to add utility locations. We make it suitable as a quick setup for events like Zubilation when those fundraising events are done, and that it's got all the infrastructure support in it that will allow us to be able to go out into the community and offer it as a location for fundraising events.
Does that change from the course of action that has been undertaken about living shorelines? And we talk about electrical outlets. That to me says that there's fewer greener things. I'm sure you can incorporate them. To the alligator exhibit, we'll put the electrical outlet there. But what I see is a lot less green in those three pictures, and I know these are just renderings. A lot less green and a lot more concrete. And I'm wondering if has the vision moved away from hands-on? Because and the other, I mean, just to add on to that question is when you look at the exhibit that you have for, it's not amphibians. I'm sorry, it's the Tropics Trail. Right. If everything is still outside, doesn't that preclude? I mean, it has to be warm enough for you to be outside. I'm wondering if people should be going through this building with both sides being. I'm just asking. I've looked over this and read it a little bit, and I'm just thinking of the 6 years of having to have been made decisions for the zoo, and I'm just wondering if the zoo is deciding, if someone in the zoo hierarchy is deciding that they're changing over from living, breathing, touching to social.
Yeah, that's not our intent. I think we want to recognize that social interactions are an important part of the product that we offer. And it's not our intent to reduce the green space. We looked at whether we could do interior exhibits in the footprint that's available. And if we did that, we would have a capacity, I think we said, of about 35 or 40 people at one time in that space, which we felt was not where we wanted to be. We wanted to be able to accommodate larger groups, more people, more flow on our busy days, and so that pushed us back to the animals being inside, viewing windows, the public looking in from the outside under a sheltered space.
Is that any different from going and looking at the alligators now and it being cold outside and them not moving? Is there any chance something moves in this new building that doesn't move in an old building?
In the alligator exhibit, when they're indoors, they're still in a cooler temperature. They're in their torpor period. Right. So they're not going to be real active. The snakes that'll be in our reptile exhibit will be tropical species where we'll maintain temperature year-round. So they should be much more active.
You mentioned wedding receptions. Do we do wedding receptions now?
We've not, because we don't have the infrastructure to support it. We don't have a facility. We don't have electrical outlets and water where we can reliably provide support for an event. We do a few little things, but it's difficult for us to manage those activities right now.
So someone would have to.
I'm sorry?
So someone would have to manage those activities if you.
I don't think we need a person. I think we would provide the facility, and we'd rely on external parties to market and vend that resource.
if there comes a time that those funding mechanisms that we have that help us run the zoo begin to change their philosophy about what the zoo is, and we have I don't know if we've come up with a person to be from the new council on the zoo commission just yet. But I think it's going to be important that you let this body know, and that body right there, the body next to me, know if changes are coming. We had some issues last year about raising money and social events and how late they were going to go. And I like Muir's correct. That's the nicest looking one, but that's the one that would keep things happening very late at the zoo. And I'm thinking about the surrounding community and the surrounding park as well, because I'm hoping at some point, I'm hoping at some point that the park committee comes back, and I know that that's been on Mr. Lennox's plate for a while now, a park master plan that dovetails into this plan as well.
Right.
I would just like to know, from a money standpoint, because that's really what my concern is now, if the full-time vet is coming, what's that going to cost? And is the zoo is it switching over to some other focal point for which to use the area? Is any of this going to block water? Is any of this what are we doing again to make sure that the water quality coming through the zoo is and I, as a mayor for 6 years, I see impervious surface and I just panic no matter where I see it. So because that's the way I was.
Designed correctly, the only real impervious surface you're going to need is under the structure. The rest of it, you can have it match the aesthetics of the zoo there. So you don't, outside of that, you don't really have to have impervious surface.
Oh, I don't know. It's the state of
I'm
Maryland,
just-
not
I mean,
me.
it can be, yeah, no, I mean, it can be done, but as far as the, any events going late, they still have to follow the city code as far as noise ordinance.
Yeah,
You can't go past a certain time. with
That's the dawn.
You're a
sound.
good man,
That's-
Miraboda.
That's the dawn.
The mayor,
I mean,
the
that-
mayor's
that's
been
the
patient,
guideline.
the mayor's been patiently waiting to get this response. So,
But I will.
go ahead, Mayor.
No, it's fine. So I don't want to contradict anything that our zoo director has said, and I hope this won't, but just to respond to your question and concern, I mean, I wouldn't endorse nor entertain nor be interested in a change in the dynamic or the feel of the zoo, because I think it's exceptional right now. And my read, whether correct or not, my read on what's been presented and when it was first presented to me is that this is really a continuation of the feel and the purpose that the zoo has tried to achieve for a long time. And when you look at some of the really sort of nice kind of special gathering spaces, that this would be, we would achieve new complements to those kind of spaces. And again, whether that's right or not, I don't know, but that's my read on both what's been presented as in words and what I see in drawings. The other thing that I wanted to bring up, Jim, at the end of your remarks, one of the things that you mentioned was, I think it was you who mentioned it, and it might have been Ralph, the infrastructure that supports these objectives, and one of the most important is parking. And so the one thing that I think, and we talked about it when I was when I visited the leaders of the zoo commission, the zoo, the public works, and his Becker Morgan group as well. The thing that came up is well, how do we long-term address the increasing demand for parking related to the zoo? And I think there's a couple things that we, as leaders of the city, are going to have to consider and address. And there are three things that I want to bring up. One is the design of the parking lot that exists on the east side of the zoo. Two, the potential interim strategies that we can employ, such as providing parking for large events at the Civic Center and maybe running trolley or in partnership with Shore Transit back and forth. And then 3, long-term, larger expansion of parking areas. And that's kind of the next phase. And that's the one those are the things that concern me most, parking, when it comes to accommodating future growth of the zoo. And I think, 20 years from now, when our successors are sitting here talking about the zoo's footprint expanding and maybe expanding throughout the park and additional pieces of the park becoming part of the zoo, they're still going to be they're going to be having conversations about parking, because we're not going to be able to accommodate additional parking in the footprint that we've got today. So I look at particularly where Churchill and Memorial Plaza,
My question
and
to you is there
I look
You open that
I look
can.
east of Memorial Plaza, east of Churchill, and that's where I look when I'm opening that can, because I think
Okay.
we need to be thinking long term about this,
And it's not just the
even
east side.
after we adopt.
It's not just the parking on the east side of the zoo, because when I take my nieces to Ben's Red Swings, we park over there because we go to the swings, and then they want to go into the zoo for, a half an hour, and then
Sure.
we come back out. And, I mean, sometimes we park on the other side, but most of the time it's more convenient depending on what they want to see first.
Yeah.
So that's kind of, both sides, there's issues, because at Ben's Ridge Swing side, I mean, people park all
way
up
up the
off
hill.
the road, and it's very tight in there too, so that area needs to be looked at as well.
I think the consultants, Bill, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you've given some consideration to some immediate term design solutions to the parking flow in the parking lot on the east side, and not addressing Mr. Boda's
I
concerns.
think there's things on both the existing lots that could be done just to clean them up a little bit, make them a little bit more efficient. And then I think, based on the last discussion we had, I think, regionally, kind of, as we're showing on the screen, there's some opportunities to, to add some parking, maybe to think about for big events, for some off-site parking, and how that might be, might be dealt with also.
Yeah, we had that discussion at our last zoo commission meeting, I think it was. We were talking about some of the events, and everyday parking is an issue, but when there is a big event, it is really a problem, and made the suggestion about Shore Transit. I reached out to Shore Transit and spoke with them, and they're very willing to do that, but it's not without cost, so that has to be considered in the budgeting of, when you're doing the ticket price and all of that. So having better parking and better options that don't cost additional money necessarily is ideal, but that option is there for big events, but the everyday parking is still an issue. And I don't know whether this got addressed between the Zoo Commission meeting and this presentation, but another real issue with the zoo, and speaking of who provides that or keeps that running, is the staff and the facility that they're working out of and calling offices. That's something that, at least when we saw it at the Zoo Commission level, was not included in this plan addressing that. And I don't think that the plan is complete for the zoo without doing something to address what they are working out of, working for offices. The trailer's sinking, it's in bad shape.
I would just say if whatever you do about parking or the rest of the zoo, it would be helpful, from my general knowledge of the last 6 years, if you would have someone from the Park Commission or the Director of Planning there to dovetail in. There is, and I will say this, and it's uncomfortable to say, but I will say it in front of everyone, there is a little bit of, it stops here and my domain starts right outside of there, and you all know it, and we're not supposed to talk about it anymore. But it exists, and I would prefer that you start to deal with that possibility of working with that commission in terms of how you finish this. But this is wonderful. I mean, this is great. Just let us know how much you need for the vet so we can start putting money away so that we can be ahead of the AZA. Because as I've said to you many times over the last 6 years, sometimes I'm glad the AZA has a really nice zoo here. The U.S. Department of Agriculture, you know what I mean?
Mr.
But
Mayor.
go.
Mr. President, I was just going to, you mentioned it before, and I was going to respond that the park master plan, when it's ready, will absolutely come here. The downtown master plan will come here. All three of these documents kind of interlock a little bit, and I think that's what you're getting
And
at.
you've got the bicycle master plan.
And the bicycle
And
master plan, when that's
That
right.
is also, that could be somewhat of a relief. It's not going to address the destination
Right.
people, but it certainly could address the local people.
Local people.
Sure.
And you're starting to see that with the park downtown, or the park downtown. You're starting to see that with the bicycles, and I think this would just be a natural extension of it. So you're probably gonna have many more bicycles come up and look for places to park.
Bike racks and.
Bike racks and the like. And I didn't notice that in here, so.
No, we
was
have
messing
not
with it.
specifically looked at that, and that's an excellent point. But to go back to, it's not our intent to change the direction of the zoo, and in fact, we very much want to maintain the direction and the character that's been established for the zoo. And that's, why we're asking for input. We want to know what's important. We do feel we've got to have options for philanthropy and for other support, but we're part of this community, and we want the final product to reflect the overall community. That's our goal.
Thank you. You've done a great job so far, so
Thank you.
keep it up.
Are there plans to do a public presentation of this, like a community meeting?
What we haven't, we talked about that in the early stages. We haven't planned anything specifically yet because we wanted to get through meeting with the zoo commission and the docents and the mayor and city council and get that feedback. And, once we feel like we have sort of a consensus on the overall direction, we can certainly do that.
That's it, yeah, that's what, not whether you
Right.
had a date for one or anything,
Right.
but just, is that in the thought process?
Yeah, we very much want the public and the community to be aware of what we're doing, to provide us feedback and hopefully provide us support.
Yeah, great,
Anything else? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bill.
thank you.
Thanks for all your time. I'm sorry we
No
ran kind of
problem.
long.
No,
No
it's
problem.
fine.
It's important.
Gotta get it right.
Work session, here to work. Okay,
Say it is inhaling. See, I knew it was gonna
Debbie here?
I don't see it.
Oh, where's mine? Yeah.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is, thank you, Mr. Mayor, appreciate it. Jenny, come on up, please. How are you this evening?
I'm doing well, thank you. How are you?
Good.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you. Obviously, I'm not Miss Stam. She is under the weather right now. For those on the council who do not know me, I'm her assistant, Jenny Hussey. During the completion of the city's 2014 analysis of impediments to fair housing, it was determined by the consultant that it would be beneficial to us to do some minor changes to the city's zoning ordinance and zoning code to clarify our communities to fair housing. These changes involve the additional language that should be included in the definitions section of the zoning code. The proposed changes have been reviewed by Jack Lennox, Director of Planning, Zoning, and Community Development, and Mark Tillman, our city attorney. Mr. Tillman has created the ordinance to amend the chapter 15.24.1620 and chapter 17.04.120 of the city code to amend the definitions and requirements of functional family. He is here today that he can answer your questions. As these ordinances represent a change to the city's zoning code, they are required to be approved by the Salisbury-Wycomico County Planning and Zoning Commission. At the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting conducted on November 19, 2015, the ordinances were discussed at a public hearing and text amendment was held. No objections were received during the public hearing, and the text amendment was approved by the commission. And I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Tillman so he can help you out.
It was my recollection that there were a number of questions about the ordinance and what, problems this may cause in single-family neighborhoods. The two ordinances that are proposed are intended to be the minimum necessary to comply with the fair housing laws of the federal government in the state of Maryland. And we really have very few requests for these approvals of functional families. I think there may have been, one or two since it was established, do we know?
One, yes.
One. And what I'm gonna, recommend if the ordinance passes is that if you have an application that includes disabled residences that might qualify under this section, I think that should be referred to the city attorney's office so that guidance can be given to the, board or the Department of Neighborhood Services in making that determination and say, okay, does this group, what requirements would be necessary under the federal and state laws to either allow or disallow the group. Another issue that was raised at the last meeting was whether or not any restrictions could be placed on the number of such facilities that would exceed, for example, 4 people living together. I think the way this is all set up, it's intended that if it's 4 or fewer, that we probably wouldn't limit the number, but if you're going to go over that number as a result of individuals who are disabled within the community, I think that the law not only allows but would encourage the city to add another provision, say, for example, that such houses not be approved within 1,000 feet of each other. And the reason for that is the literature out there about Americans with Disabilities Act is that you don't want to create a disabled ghetto somewhere within the city, that's not the purpose, that people benefit by being integrated into a community of single-family residences rather than being clustered together all on the same block. So I think we could add that to the definition if you would like to do that, to require that they not be, but you certainly cannot bar them, and you cannot refuse to accommodate Americans, people with disabilities under these circumstances.
And setting a limit like that, we can do that? Is that?
Yeah, I think you
That's-
can.
okay.
The American Planning Association has a memo out discussing that.
Okay.
And the word ghetto was right out of their memo, basically, that that the purpose of the act is not to establish we're gonna cluster all the disabled people in this
Put everybody
neighborhood.
in.
That's not what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to encourage the integration of disabled people throughout the community and really treat them no differently than others within the community.
That is, I got some experience in that field, and I know of no facilities in the county or the city that have more than 4. And they generally are pushing more like 3 and 2, have a roommate for that main reason. And one of their primary missions is to integrate as many of the individuals in the community as possible. But they've even created situations where for volunteering and for funding, if you send more than 4 or 5 to a facility to volunteer or work, you only get credit for 3 of those individuals. So they're pushing more and more to be the integrated system rather than the clusters.
Yes. Well, on the other piece of that, when they're having these types of properties, are there requirements, I guess, as far as the property itself has to be ADA compliant? I would imagine for it to So should that be added in here with?
I don't think, well, the city doesn't regulate that. I think the
Okay.
state regulates that type of thing. So that's, we don't have to worry about that. They couldn't have a license to operate a facility unless they meet the state standard. But the purpose of this also is we're not supposed to be setting up hospitals in single-family neighborhoods either. You know, it's supposed to be a situation where you have disabled people integrated into a single-family neighborhood who do require some level of care, but
Yeah.
we're not talking about building a
I mean, it's not gonna be a nursing home, this is
It's-
more of people who are,
Yeah.
they're independent, but they need.
They require assistance and help of
Yeah,
others
yeah.
in order to function.
I mean, some of them may
in the
still
community.
work and stuff like that, but it's
Right.
not,
They
yeah.
are functional.
Yeah.
Most of them are functional people.
Well,
Okay.
that's all well and good. But that's not how this happens. It just isn't. I'm just going to look right at the four of you and go, this isn't how this happens. People get put in a house, federal government's paying for it. They're left on their own regardless of how many there are until something happens in the neighborhood, and then they're protected from what they were doing in the neighborhood. But then they're left alone because they're supposed to be integrating. Now, you have some of our neighborhoods that have 3 and 4 different types of protected classes in the same street. So I'd like to get back to the 1,000 feet that you mentioned earlier about how closely these houses can be put together. No one wants to discriminate, but everybody has a class that's protected, and then you have a neighborhood that is 5.5 blocks long that has 5 different types of protected classes on it. Now, it was our understanding in the neighborhood that when you do this, regardless of the number of protected classes, those classes had to be a certain thing apart, and that's never happened in our neighborhood. They've been right next door to one another. They've been on a whole cul-de-sac together, 4 different types of protected classes. Now, here comes this one, which we are all certain in our hearts that we do not want to discriminate against. But these are money-making ventures for people who have houses. It's how the houses in my neighborhood got to be like this. I pray to God that my neighbors are watching this evening because they know exactly which houses they are. And they know exactly what it means when you have this concentration. So my question to you before I would be ready to move forward is, how many different types of protected classes can be protected in the same mile radius? Or does everybody get to start over again from the beginning? If the protected class is blue sweaters and mustaches, how many of those can go? And if we get 2 of those and the next protected class is gray blazer, does that protected class get to go right next door to this protected class, which is right next door to rehab facilities, which is right next door to a host of things? And now we have these. I will say to you that there will be some intrepid person out there who finds a house and finds people and gets people to live there, and it's free money. So, as big as my heart is, there are many of our neighborhoods, especially in District 4, that are under a huge amount of strain from the amount of different protected classes that we have. So the question really comes for us, if we're not creating that word, and I don't want to use that word, I find that word to be horrendous. If we're not creating those types of neighborhoods, another protected class, how many more protected classes do we accept, or the closeness of the protected classes do we accept before we have created what it is exactly that you've said?
Well, the only thing we're talking about here are Americans with disabilities. That's it. Anything beyond that.
And I respect that, but I will respectfully say to you, I'm sure that is exactly what was said to neighborhood associations every time a new designation has come through in this city. Well, it's just this one. And then it's this one. And now it's 4 and 5 different protected classes in a 5-block radius.
Well, how many are allowed in a?
But they're all
mean,
under the.
Well, that's the question for us.
How many are allowed?
There's no set number.
Yeah, I mean, but when we're talking about protected classes, so, I mean, I know we got Americans with Disabilities, we have some of the halfway houses, and then what would be the other ones?
Go-getters? You have
But they would fall
They're under
under
the
the ADA, would they not?
Well, but this is the question from the Supreme Court, and this is what we have never been able to get clarification on, is how closely, if you and I are the same protected class, neighborhoods were under the assumption that there had to be a certain distance in between each house.
Yeah.
That has not happened. Whole swaths and whole blocks of our city are taken up. When you add this protected class into this protected class, and I want to protect them. I want this class to be protected. But we're creating what it is the government says we don't want to create by not being specific with how closely these dwellings can be to one another. Because what we have in the neighborhoods on Division Street from right here all the way to Union Avenue is just places where there are 4 and 5 different types of protected class. And they may all be under ADA. I don't know,
Well, I
but
mean,
it's a
if
different
that were,
house.
I would think if they were, it's, in some of those groups, it's probably combined under one, which would be ADA. And then the other group that I could see would be the halfway houses. Because everything else would be under ADA.
However,
So then you don't have 4 or 5 protected classes, you have 2. Basically. I
right,
mean,
for
that's-
single-family
Yeah.
neighborhoods, I'm not so sure they're worried about the designation of how you got protected or
Yeah.
whatever it is.
Yeah.
But when you live in a neighborhood where 7, 8, 9, and 10 houses in a 2 and 3 block radius are these houses, it's stressful on property values.
That I understand, but if we're gonna do something legislatively as far as distance, we don't wanna then have to name all these protected classes. We've got
Right.
basically 2 types.
Mm-hmm.
So then we can say that, hey, these 2 types, they have to be,
And that's why I think we need guidance, because
Yeah, that's-
no one has ever been sure how this all goes down.
There's a legal issue and there's an emotional issue.
There's a
The
property
emotion- the
value
emotional-
issue.
The emotional issue, we can't do anything about. Can't. The legal issue is a legal issue. So we need a legal opinion relative to how we can proceed legally. That's what we need to do. So Mark, if you
Yeah.
would,
I think what I would suggest is that we ask Jack to take a look at what, out there is an appropriate density of such approved houses, and what's the premium density, or what should it be? And then if the council would like to then plug that in, we could make it part of this approval of a functional family process for disabled individuals, that they shall not approve one of these within so many feet of another similar.
I'd be okay with that as long as you, if you could, in your capacity, and I don't know who you ask. I don't know if you ask the courts. I don't know if you ask the Justice Department. I'm not sure if you ask whatever agency, the Americans with Disabilities Act or any of the other protected classes. When we designated these, were we supposed to put these this close to one another?
Right now, we have nothing regulating that.
I'm not saying we, I'm saying, because I would assume that somebody previously who's come to the city, whether it be you or the planning and zoning director throughout the last 50 years, would have said, we're going to protect this class, this is what the federal government has said we had to do. This is the legislation. And I have a hard time believing nobody sitting behind the table ever asked how close can we put these things.
I would suggest that you contact the DDA.
DDA?
Legal attorney, DDA.
DDA.
Developmental Disabilities Administration.
Okay.
Legal advisors, and ask them, because I'm sure they've been asked the question before.
I mean, it's my understanding that those organizations sort of join in this thing of not having them too dense. That they don't want to have these houses piled together either. But that's what I'm.
There-
Then you need to come to a consensus of how many should be in a neighborhood.
Well, there's another issue here. I think you mentioned multiple different groups. And there are those that fit under that great big umbrella that's ADA that meet the definition of a disabled person. Then there are others that we are seeing coming up that are group homes, that the person's living in that home may or may not meet that definition of a disabled person. And there are managed homes where there's a house manager. There are other group homes where it's self-managed. There is no one person in charge. And there are some that are halfway houses for various transitions in transitional housing. Some may and some may not qualify. How many of those 4 have to be disabled for it, just one, half, all, for it to be under the ADA umbrella and be fall under this category? And how do we include, we have to write the language broad enough, I think, to include the ADA houses and any other similar homes that.
Halfway houses,
halfway
group
houses and group
homes,
homes and all of
and
those, that
and
category, so
specified
almost
care
basically
homes,
naming
yeah.
another.
Well, we really, we cover those and we regulate those elsewhere in our code.
But does it say how close together they can be and how far away from another ADA
I
group home they
don't
have to
think
be?
so, and that's why that's why I suggested initially making this as narrow as possible. I don't really think that the council wants to rewrite group homes, for example. I mean, you know, right now, I think under the current legislation, there's really no provision, for example, for people who've been released from prison living in a halfway house to be able to be established in single-family neighborhoods. I don't think that's.
Either the group domiciliary or group home speaks to how close these facilities or uses can be placed to one another. And it was my understanding when I was the director of neighborhood services that if the facility, is somewhat different in this case, was because we're talking about modifying the functional family definition. That's what the consultant asked us to do based on the recommendations that we got. If they have a license to operate one of these 2 facilities and they meet all the requirements, there's really nothing the city can do about how close together they are. That's my understanding based
Under
on
current
my
law.
exposure. Well, that's.
Or you're saying we
that's-
can't write a law
we-
that
I don't
does
think
that?
you can write the law to do that.
Because the state governs it.
But Mark's saying that we can because they don't want them all grouped together.
Right.
So I
Well,
guess that's where we
I-
need the
I
clarification.
think what Mark is suggesting, that we make an improvement to the functional family definition, because that's really what we're talking about here. Not a group domiciliary or a group home, we're talking about a functional family for persons with disability. So it sounds like Mr. Tillman is suggesting that perhaps you can restrict how close those functional family allowances are. Is that what you're saying,
Yes.
Mark? But not addressing the issue of group home or group domiciliary.
Yeah, I was never suggesting that we reopen that because again.
I think we've already been-
COMAR regulates
Yeah.
group homes.
I think we've already been down that road, and there is nothing we can do about it.
I think that when we're considering what that distance is, we also have to be mindful that we have a significant population here. And as the trend has been to push people to community models, living in these homes in the community rather than in institutions, the least restrictive environment that they call it, that we have gotten more and more and more of them. And if we put the distance at too high a number, we could be accused of pushing them out because we can't accommodate all the ones that are here. Let's say we said you gotta be 10 blocks away, and you can't get enough houses with a 10-block span to fit all the ones we have. I think we have to be really careful about that too. So we kind of need to know how many we have.
Well, I think, I go back, and I think the first question is, can we do it?
Absolutely.
Legally. So let's get the answer to that question, which
Yep,
would really
correct.
take a phone call. Let's get the answer to that question, and then we can deal with it.
I would suggest, not because I think Mr. Heath knows more or less than I do, but an independent group, instead of a group that advocates for, I'd really like to see some case law, is really what I'd like to see. I mean, if you called me and said, how many tennis players can we put on this block? I'd say you put 20 tennis players on this block. Whether, I don't know whether or not I would prefer to see some sort of case law where property owners and cities said, we now have this concentration of these things. Are these homes supposed to be within this distance of each other? All the people that I live around are asking for is some relief. That's all.
And
The homes that
if-
you're referring to, would these be, I'm guessing, state licensed homes in your community?
Well, that's what I believe to be the case, but as I'm looking through the zoning code, and I don't profess to be an expert in zoning, but group homes and group domiciliaries are not permitted in residential R5, 8, or 10 districts. So my question is, why are they there in the first place? If they meet the definition of group
Could you
home.
repeat that again, Steve? I
Tom.
mean, Tom. I'm thinking of your last name.
That's all right. That happens often.
He's been called worse.
Steve Thomas.
I was called,
Steve
what was it?
Thomas.
Tom.
He's got a new
Tom
nickname
Pick,
around
I
there
think,
also.
when I took the director's job in neighborhood services on WBSC, it said Tom Pick. Yeah, I didn't live
Steve
that down.
Thomas.
So, group home and group domiciliary are up to 10 people, so supervised, blah, blah, blah. But as I'm looking at R5, R8, and R10 residential districts, permitted uses, special exception, ordinance permit, I don't see either one of those.
Our code
Groups.
only permits them
Anyway.
outside of the single-family neighborhood.
Well, but I don't
But
know if you.
but the Supreme Court has said you cannot discriminate against.
Well, more importantly, state law has been
Yeah.
passed that, they regulate these things.
Yeah. I mean, I think they're there because
The
They
state
were
goes
protected
beyond
class.
the ADA, I can tell you that. The state of Maryland has given even broader protection than the federal government has.
Well, we looked at one that was near the councilman's home years ago, and the state politely told me to go away. You have no jurisdiction.
Yeah, so even though our code says it can't be there, it can,
Yeah, it
obviously.
can. It's the
So
state.
So
maybe
it's,
we need to
you know,
change
I
that
agree.
part.
I think we
and-
need to make a
but,
couple
yeah,
phone calls.
if we can do it. Back to your suggestion.
And,
Yeah.
and back, and also to what's before us is not necessarily for a group home. This is,
The function,
This
this
is-
is very
Yeah, this is
specific.
This could
Functional
literally be, 4 people living together, 2 of whom are disabled, 2 are not,
Yeah.
who exceed the number allowed, and they're coming in and saying, we want to be considered a functional family. Here's why. You need to consider the fact that 2 of these applicants are disabled, and you've got, when you're looking at these factors, that's what we're talking about doing. Not necessarily somebody who goes out and gets a license from the state of Maryland to operate a group home or a facility or a house.
so would adding to this maybe a clause or something that would say this definition excludes group homes? Or can we not?
Well, the problem is, I think the whole group home aspect of it is something that we really can't regulate. What we're really doing is we're saying that when we're looking at a single family, what these laws say is that we have to treat the group of people just like we treat everybody else, and we have to make reasonable accommodations in the case of disabilities. That's really what the law says in a nutshell. And, now you don't have to make reasonable accommodations for 5 people or 4 who want to live together who aren't disabled.
They have to meet this
We-
criteria.
But you have to
But
meet
if
the
you meet the
criteria.
criteria of being a disabled individual, then we have to basically give you extra consideration. And we can't, now, we could find, disabled people could come in and apply and ask for something that would be determined not reasonable. What you're asking for is, we're gonna have to make this turn this single family neighborhood into a hospital facility with parking lots, and, that's unreasonable in this neighborhood, and we're not gonna permit it. And I think you could legitimately do that.
See, now I'm back to my original issue with this. I'm sorry, but the requirements, the specific requirements that are listed, and tell me if I'm not reading this right, but someone comes in, there are disabled persons in the home, and they're asking for this consideration. They still have to meet these requirements of a functional family unless they say, one or more of them can't apply due to the disability.
Yes,
It was an accommodation for the disability.
correct.
But when we have these homes, a lot of them have people who aren't sharing bank accounts. In fact, they're very careful to keep their money separately. So if they can't meet all of the criteria, are they excluded from it? Or if there are several of them, I mean, how many of them can they be excluded from and still be denied a functional family? And if we decide that they're not a functional family and we don't let them in, but they're disabled, then are we discriminating?
Well, these criteria were actually pulled out of case law, which still exists, in order to define what is a single-family unit. And these criteria of sharing a single household budget, sharing a permanent bond or commitment, maintaining a legal domicile. I mean, and it also has to be people who, prepare and eat meals together. Those are considered people that are single housekeeping units. If they're related by blood or marriage, we don't even go into that. We
Right.
don't look at any of these criteria. This would only apply to unrelated individuals who are applying. And the point, you kind of have to look at it like, do we want a boarding house or don't we want, I mean, my grandfather loved living in a boarding house when he was a single man in Baltimore and used to tell me how the lady cooked him a great meal every night and he never wanted to know what it was. But most single-family neighborhoods do not want boarding houses anymore. And really the purpose of this is to make sure that this is a group of people that when one of them moves out, the owner of the property isn't advertising looking for a roommate for the other 4 that are still there, or 3 that are still there. This has to be a group of people who are living together because they want to live together, who have a commitment to one another, and who basically share their income and their expenses, not the situation which I see in like college housing where that's my cabinet, don't get my cereal or drink my beer. And, because that's not a family.
Those same situations happen in where several people from a facility are put in, or a group are put into a home. They're not choosing who they're rooming with, and they do have separate cabinets for their food and their goods. And they don't share common meals necessarily because they may be on different schedules for medication reasons, and they don't share bank accounts. And I'm just wondering how many of these have to be met? One of them, half of them, all of them?
Well, the group home situation.
And how old is the case law? Because I know a lot of families that are really families, all related, that don't do a lot of these things.
Well, the Supreme Court pretty much has said that if with regard to related individuals by blood or marriage, you pretty much can't regulate that unless they're operating. For example, there was some cases where there was a family, one brother and his family lived on one floor of the house and another brother and his family lived on the floor below. They each had their own facilities and they said, oh, wait a minute, this is basically turning your single family house into a duplex. This is illegal. So to that degree, you can regulate that situation. If you're talking about a real group home that the state has said hands off, we really can't do anything about it. We can't, if they have different cabinets for their things, then we're stuck with what the state does. This would only be a situation, probably the likely situation would be one that I talked about earlier, where you have one or more people who are disabled, they aren't related, they're exceeding the number. And, the argument by the family would be that in order to keep this disabled individual at home, we need more of us here. We share the load, so therefore we would reasonably accommodate this group and not require all of these criteria. For example, not dependent upon or supported by others in the case of someone with a disability. That might be one of the ones we throw out real quick because by definition, someone who's disabled probably can't support himself.
Well, that's not true.
In some cases. it
In
could
some
be.
cases.
No,
it could be true.
not in all
I just can't
cases.
make,
But that's an
Yeah.
example where you
Yeah.
would have an individual who really was dependent upon others, and therefore we would throw that criteria out for that individual. This is all a case-by-case thing. I'm not
Right.
trying to.
Yeah. All right, I think, we could conjecture all night. I think there's 2 questions. One, Mr. Ireton would like to see some case law I would like to check with the Department of Development and Disabilities Administration, ask them specifically whether we can legislate this type of thing in terms of distance. And hopefully the two will come back with the same answer, and then we can take it up again. That sound good to everybody? Okay. Thanks, Jane.
You're welcome, thank you. Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thanks for sitting with us.
Anytime.
As we torture you.
Council have anything else?
I was just gonna ask about, I'm searching through things from Diane and Kim about pending items. And I can't seem to find that particular attachment now. This is an iPhone 6S, which is brand new, which means it's on here somewhere, and I just can't find it. And I apologize for that.
Upcoming work session.
Just upcoming work, or the pending item, because we're now a couple,
We didn't meet 2 weeks ago because we didn't have a meeting.
Okay.
So it would be 2 weeks old, so it probably is rolled off your phone.
Oh.
We'll meet tomorrow
Right.
morning and it'll be put out again.
You can change your settings on your.
It'll go out tomorrow.
all right, because I just, that, the issue of the letter that came from Newtown
Yes.
is, I think is very pressing, and I think we need to quickly get on top of that right away, so we quickly get on top of that right away.
It's on the agenda, the next
Okay,
agenda.
it is. How about,
Yes.
I know we're not ready to go back to these two things. I don't know. Someone would have to tell me if we are or not. Curfew plus and the continued discussion of rent stabilization. I don't know. The only reason I bring up curfew plus is because, where were we?
I can,
Somebody
weigh
brought
in
it
on
up.
all of this.
Okay.
Yeah, so curfew plus, I've just asked for the council president to afford us a little bit of time before the administration forwards a plan, but we're working on it actively. Chief of Police is the primary author, and once I'm confident in a plan, I promise we'll bring it to the council. It's just complicated, and but we do want to bring that forward, and we are working on it. I'm sorry, what were the other two?
The Newtown and then the rent issues.
Newtown, yes. So we're, as I said, we're going to share our response with Mr. Smith, to Mr. Smith with you, which I think addresses his letter, which was inaccurate at best.
Right.
You know, there were just some glaring mistakes in what was said. And so we're going to address that. But I think, you know, I agree that there's an opportunity here to talk about some of the things that have long been problematic with how we apply historic district ordinance in this community, and just problems with the ordinance and problems with the law. So there's an opportunity to consider some of those things here. So we'll bring that forward too. The third piece is rent stabilization. I don't have any plans to propose a rent stabilization program, but alternatives for and other ideas for supporting neighborhood integrity and home ownership. We absolutely intend to, through the FY17 budget, propose programming. And if you'd like that in advance, sort of a conceptual overview, rather than just through the budget, we can do that too.
There's a couple other ones out there. I know Ms. Glantz helped us out the other day with some of the properties that are trying to head towards home ownership, including the one at the corner of Union Avenue and Division Street. I know that one's coming. I'm assuming Mr. Golba got through all of the issues. You're not going to know. Of what's the one where you got to go back and look? With
Title
who?
search?
Title
Title
search.
search.
I thought that was what his problem was with that
We
property.
got past that.
Did we get past that? Is that
Which property are we talking?
1110 North
1110
Division.
North Division. I'm just saying because the sign's still out there and my name's still not on the sign, and that's the mayor now. So I'm just trying to make sure, make sure we get it. I mean,
I
if
thought that
SNH
sold on December 7th. Yeah,
it did sell to them.
to SNHS.
Okay. Okay, well then if I would just suggest that
There
somebody
was
take up the signs.
There was a press
Okay.
release to that effect.
I didn't send it to me again. And then the other question, I just wanted to find out what was all of the places that have gotten demolished and those lots that have gone up for sale, if anybody is the neighbors, there's 2 of them in my neighborhood and 1 of them north of my neighborhood. The neighbors are asking, now
Could you?
they're not
give us
exactly the best
addresses?
questions, you know,
Yeah.
call the number on the, call the number on the sign.
Could you give addresses? And
Yeah,
that way we
I'll
can
get
better.
them back for you.
But it reminds me that there's another item, and we'll talk about it at the agenda meeting tomorrow morning. We met with Delegate Cherie Sample Hughes today to talk about some legislative issues for the upcoming session, and one of the items that I think it would behoove us to, for the council to consider, is a change to how tax sales are handled, and with specific respect to the city of Salisbury, and ultimately making it less of an tool for investors to make some quick money, and more of a tool to actually create home ownership opportunities in Salisbury. The tax sale process has become, as Mr. Tillman knows, has become a joke. It is a way to make a couple quick bucks, and at the expense of ever doing anything to actually transition some of these properties. So the properties in the worst shape end up being nothing more than a tool for profit. So I think it would be good once we have some sense as to whether or not there's an interest from a delegate or our delegate to have council weigh in, consider it, and listen to whether or not this is something you want to endorse and resolve to support, to send up to Annapolis.
If you could, with the good delegate and with the other good delegate, Anderton, bring up tax differential again for us, please.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
It's on my radar.
There was also a recent comment by DHCD that they have money that they're putting out that they will match. The comment was, if the city will put up money to encourage home ownership, we will match it. And there was no limit put on it. They have, I'm sure there are limits, but I'm sure there are limits. But he was adamant that more municipalities start to do things like Baltimore's housing programs where they're matching down payments, particularly taking homes. I think we have a particular opportunity to move homes from rental to ownership and to get more city employees into city owning homes in the city. Won't come out with that match, but it is a match, so it's something that we have to participate in.
Good.
Yeah, good. Jim covered a couple of things that I had questions about. I got a couple of things. First, can we get an update on Cracker Barrel? Because I think I get like more emails and
That is the hot topic,
texts
isn't
and
it?
stuff
Wait,
like that.
what's the question?
Cracker Barrel.
An update on Cracker Barrel because.
I mean, I can give you an update right now.
Okay.
Between my mom and everybody else, you know, they all
Jonathan's
want to
site,
know.
since he knows.
Oh, yeah.
You could go to Mr. Taylor's site. He seems to know more than anyone
Well,
else.
I mean,
I mean, this is not really a legislative issue, but you know, I can give you just a community. It's not a government issue. You know, as
No,
you
but
as you know,
community
all
is
permits
there.
were issued probably 12 months ago, and those with veto power over decisions on the mall property, tenants at the mall have decided not to support Cracker Barrel. That's it. Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
Cracker Barrel Director of Real Estate Joe Janes and I talked on the phone today, and you know, they said for 10 years we've been trying to come to Salisbury, and every single property, you know, we get to, there's some problem, and I think it's worth pointing out and worth saying publicly that none of those challenges have occurred with city government. They continue to be either personal, you know, property owner problems, or, you know, interrelationship issues. And I learned about some of the past ones on the phone today. There's all sorts of rumors about, oh, the city, you know, doesn't want this, the city. Nope. And Cracker Barrel said, you know, on the phone today, we'd do anything to get there. We just can't find a
I
site.
just think as long as I can remember, I mean, the city has done for years, has been over backwards to make sure Cracker Barrel comes, and, you know, that's disappointing. But, okay. The next one is, one of the things I think maybe we need to start doing is doing a better job of advertising trash pickup through the holidays and when there's a holiday. And I think sometimes there's a lot of confusion, and I had a couple things over the holiday break and most of it was just educating people, you know, if your trash day is this day, then it's going to be, because they don't know a lot of times and they forget. And so I think maybe if that's something we can look at maybe advertising that better. So everybody, I mean, I tried to share it on Facebook and social media, but, you know, I only reach so many people, so.
I thought I saw a note from Chris. Wasn't there a?
There's always a press
Always a
release, and
press
there's
release.
always, yeah, I mean, and there's always, we can put it in water bills, I mean, you know, chances are people just don't pay attention.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
don't, because
I mean-
I would think common sense would tell you.
And there's that.
Yeah. Common sense would tell you if it's holidays on Friday and your trash is supposed to be picked up on a Friday, that it's gonna be picked up.
Nobody's
that-
coming on Christmas Day to pick
Yeah, I
up
would
your
always,
trash.
Yeah.
I used to have a guy that worked for Public Works, lived across the street from me. If his trash can was out, mine went out. And everybody else on the
That's a
street.
good idea.
That's a good way of doing it.
There you
But he's
go.
moved, and so, you know, but now if they see my trash out, they put their trash out, so.
So now you're the bellwether.
Now I'm the guy now.
All right,
And Mr. E, did we, and if I missed it, I apologize, have we gotten to committee assignments yet?
yes.
We
I have to talk to you about it. I haven't
Oh.
gotten up with you.
Just me?
Yeah,
Oh,
because you weren't here.
all right. That was that on the 21st?
Last,
It was the 21st.
21st.
It was
Yeah,
21st, because we didn't meet the 28th.
yeah, and it's all,
My trash didn't go out either.
half of it was in bed, so.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll get with you and, anything else?
Yeah, just coffee with your council. It's time for another coffee with your council coming up soon. So Kim was going to send out an email to look for dates, start looking for,
Yeah,
I
the
think
calendar.
we're east side this time, maybe Emmanuel Wesley, and again, they were very accommodating.
There, or we could even maybe work something out with East Side Deli.
Man.
And they got,
Yeah, maybe.
Anything with food, Jim will be there.
I'm there.
Side deli.
or East Side or Johnny's, I think
Yeah,
either one of those would.
I'm just
Also
thinking
good.
space-wise and.
No, there's plenty of
conducive-
room.
Yeah, there.
And Johnny's is new too. But
Yeah, I
there's
know,
more
but I don't know
seating.
about in terms of being able to hear and talk.
Yeah, there,
and
probably, East Side might be
But
better
we-
for
yeah,
that,
we
'cause I
talk-
think there's more seating.
That's what I
in
was
there.
thinking.
Yeah.
Have we had him any other place other than the church?
Yeah, we've had them
No, I'm saying for that, in that area.
in that area. Well, we've only had one in that area, so because we
You
haven't.
had it
had
at the firehouse,
Firehouse downtown
Downtown.
here,
a church on.
one up on Dagsboro Road.
No, I'm talking about just to make sure we cover all the districts.
Yeah,
From that district, has there been any other?
no, we've only been there once and it
Okay.
was there at Emmanuel.
Maybe we should, for this time, we should go back to that, just so that people know was there anybody there?
Yeah, it was a real good turnout for
Oh,
that
good,
one.
then
What
let's.
Where was it?
At
Emmanuel
Emmanuel
Wesley?
Emmanuel
Wesley.
Wesleyan.
Oh, they did?
It was
Yeah.
quick.
We had
Yeah.
we had a
So
really
let's
good
do
turnout
that
on it. It was
to
some
make
hot
sure that we
topic that
get a-
everybody wanted to talk about, so whenever
Yeah.
it was there.
So for February?
Yeah,
District
February.
5.
do it, get it quick, because the schedules are filling rapidly.
Yes, especially during sessions.
Second or third week, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay.
We can send that out.
Ms. Jackson, anything? You okay?
Not a thing.
Okay.
I don't want to prolong nothing.
If there's nothing else? We're adjourned.
Vista.